Nelson Rolelala Mandela. Let's look at the correct pronunciation of this word.
Like Rala Lala, Rala Lala. And now slower. Rala Lala, Rala Lala.
I'm sure your confusion regarding the middle name of Nelson Mandela is over, and now you can confidently pronounce Rolelala correctly. Now, children, all your chapters are beginning with a before you read, an introduction to your chapter. Now, let's look at before you read regarding this chapter. This chapter is dealing with apartheid, which was a political system that separated people according to their race. Now, can you name one such country? Yes, that is South Africa. Nelson Mandela and African National Congress were an integral part of South Africa that spent a lifetime fighting against apartheid. In fact, Mandela had to spend nearly 30 years in prison. And children, that's quite a long time. And when democratic elections were held in South Africa in 1994, Mandela became the first black president of a new nation. It was a rejoicing moment. And this extract, you know, that is taken from his autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, speaks about this historic moment in South Africa. And this is the inauguration that the lesson is highlighting about. So let's move on with the lesson. Now let's look at the historic moment when Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first black president. Nelson Mandela became the first black president in South Africa after more than 3 centuries of white rule, white supremacy. So it is not a joke. For 300 years, they were suppressed by the whites. Important points to remember here is that the first democratic election they won by majority of 252 seats out of 400. Then the inauguration ceremony took place in the buildings, Union Buildings, Amphitheatre in Pretoria, and it was attended by politicians and dignitaries from more than 140 countries around the world. For Nelson Mandela, it was the most beautiful experience, and he strongly believed that never again such oppression will prevail in the beautiful land of South Africa. That was the most memorable moment in history when the blacks, whites, and colorids sang and danced together with joy. As we move on with the lesson, there are certain words and phrases we need to really keep it in mind to understand the flowery language used in the chapter. Now, some of the words and phrases are given in column A. Number one, a rainbow gathering of different colors and nation means a beautiful coming together of various peoples like the colors in the rainbow. Now, here the word rainbow is metaphorically is being used to represent the various people, the blacks, the whites, and the colorids present during that inauguration day. Number two, the seat of white supremacy refers to the center of racial superiority when the whites were ruling over South Africa. Number three, be overwhelmed with a sense of history means feel deeply emotional remembering and understanding the moments that have led to the movement. Number four, resilience that defies the imagination means a great ability, almost unimaginable, to remain unchanged by suffering. Number five, a glimmer of humanity means a sign of human feeling of goodness, kindness, pity, and justice. A twilight existence means a half secret life, like a life lived in the fading light between sunset and darkness. So, this is a really beautiful literary extravaganza, that's how I call it, to make the lesson more interesting and readable. Now let's start with the lesson. 10th May dawned bright and clear. 10th May means that historic day of the year 1994 when Nelson Mandela took the oath to be the first black president of South Africa. For the past few days, I had been pleasantly besieged by dignitaries and world leaders who were coming to pay their respects before the inauguration. Besieged means to be surrounded closely by. So Nelson Mandela was surrounded closely by many dignitaries, world leaders who came to pay their respects before the inauguration. And the inauguration was a great one because it was one of the largest gathering that ever happened on South African soil. The ceremonies took place in the lovely sandstone amphitheater formed by the Union Buildings in Pretoria. So the image you see there is a beautiful building, the amphitheater in South Africa. So for decades, this had been the seat of white supremacy, and now it was the site of a rainbow gathering of different colors and nations for the installation of South Africa's first democratic non-racial government. So you can imagine the feeling here. This was the building where the whites were holding and they were ruling for 300 years. And now a South African leader, Nelson Mandela, is going to address to the entire nation, the entire leaders of the nation from this building. It was indeed a very proud and emotional moment for the entire South Africans. On that lovely autumn day, I was accompanied by my daughter Zanani. Now, you must be wondering how come it is autumn in the month of May. South Africa is situated in the southern hemisphere, so you can find out the geographical details. And you can see in the picture there is his daughter Zanani. Mr. De Klerk was first sworn in as the second deputy president. So you can see in the image that is second deputy president Mr. De Klerk. Thabo Mbeki was sworn in as first deputy president. So you can see Thabo Mbeki there in the image. When it was my turn, I pledged to obey and uphold the Constitution and to devote myself to the well-being of the Republic and its people. So Nelson Mandela, he stood there, took the oath, promising to devote himself completely to the well-being of the people of Africa, South Africa, to the assembled guest and the watching world. Now remember, South Africa's victory over apartheid was a world movement, and everybody was watching live all over the world during that inauguration moment. It was indeed an unforgettable chapter in history, and everybody was in tears looking at the great leader being, given the opportunity to lead his countrymen. Today, all of us do, by our presence here, confer glory and hope to newborn liberty. Confer means to give, and hope to newborn liberty. Liberty means freedom. So, for a long time, South Africa was under the oppressive rules of the whites. Now, this newborn liberty or this freedom was a kind of blessing and a great event for their nation. Out of the experience of an extraordinary human disaster that lasted too long must be born a society that all humanity will be proud. Now here, Nelson Mandela is referring the apartheid as human disaster. Indeed, it was a disaster because it was a very cruel and oppressive rule that made people hate one another just because the color or the color of the skin. So he calls it as a human disaster that has to be ended, and a new human society where there is no room for such discrimination.